All right, in the next few videos, we're going to take a look at Apache's configuration files on Ubuntu. So here I have a new Ubuntu server off of Rackspace, and I've installed Apache 2 already. So I've already run my apt-get install Apache 2. And in the main lecture, we talked about some various locations of configuration files you're going to need to know about to properly manage and configure and interact with Apache. So the first place we're going to start is the log directory. So most logs in Linux are stored in var log. So if we change directories into var log and take a look in here, you can see there's all sorts of different log files that we have to deal with. If we scroll up a little bit here, you'll see the Apache 2 folder, and that's where Apache keeps its logs. So if we change directories into Apache 2 and then take a look around, you can see that we have a couple of different logs here. So we have the access logs and the error logs. And the access logs, if we take a look at those, show us the different IP addresses that have accessed our server. So you can see here that we've got our IP addresses, we have the date and time, and then we have the request for what these IP addresses are trying to access. So you can even see there's some funny ones in here. Because these IP addresses get recycled a lot, sometimes you'll see a lot of this stuff, and most of these will be returning 404 errors. So if you have a busy server, this will obviously be will have many more lines in it, but since this is basically a brand new server, there's really not much here. The other set of logs we have are our error logs. So if we look in those, we can see the different errors that have come up. So there's a bunch of permission denied errors. So let's see what these are. And you'll also see here that Apache will have, let's see, index.cgi. We don't have any CGI scripts on here. So Apache will also put general web errors in here. So essentially anything that's going wrong with Apache most likely will end up in this log file. So startup and shutdown errors, if you have improper configuration files, things like that, they will all show up inside of this log file. And Ubuntu will also roll over these logs for you. So you'll see these .1. When they get to a certain size, they'll start to archive themselves so they don't get overrun. So it's good to know where these log files are. Access and error, they both can help in diagnosing problems with web servers. So keep those in mind as you're working through your assignments, especially later on in the semester. So the next directory that's really important with Apache is in the etc Apache 2 directory. And if we take a look in here, you can see all the different folders and configuration files used to control how Apache operates. So in the etc directory, most often you'll find configuration files for the various pieces of software that are running on our server. You guys will probably remember your etc SSH folder, which has all the SSH configuration files in it. So in this case, we're going to be working with the Apache directory, which has all the Apache configuration files in it. So a few things to note here. The first one is the apache.conf. This one's important because this is going to hold all the master configuration files for the Apache web server. It's kind of a beast, so if you go in there to poke around, there's a lot of stuff to look at. Many lines. Lots of instructions too. So anytime you see these the pound signs here in front of the text, those are essentially comments. So you can type anything you want in there, and it's not going to be run by the server. But you can see peppered throughout here the different timeout and lock file, and you'll see all the different configurations in here. And all of these have a very specific purpose within Apache. And we're not going to go into all of these right now because the ones we really care about aren't actually in this file. These are more global setup files, and Ubuntu's already done a pretty good job of setting some sane defaults for us. So we're going to leave this alone. We're going to exit out of here. And we're going to concentrate on the sites available folder. And in the sites available folder is so if we go into here, these are essentially the virtual hosts that I was talking about in the lecture. And this default file here, so if you look at default, this actually gives us information about the hello world, or the default Apache file that displays when we first install Apache. So you can see here we have a virtual host block or tag, and you'll notice that this is kind of, looks a little bit like HTML, but it's kind of actually more like XML. And most of the Apache configuration files, particularly virtual hosts, are written like this. So you can see here our document root. This will become important. This is the default location of our web accessible documents. And we also have some directory blocks here that tell the web server what can and can't be accessed and what can be displayed on the screen. We also have our logging, so we can see where our logs are going. And that's pretty much it. That's all that we really need to set up a general virtual host for our server. So the main things that we're going to have to worry about are document root, and then when we get into virtual hosts, we're going to be using the server name directive, which will tell the server where, depending on the URL that's requested, what pages to serve up. And that's kind of the crux of the virtual host. And in the next video, we'll get into those a little bit more. The other folder you'll want to be aware of is the mods available folder. And in here are all the different Apache modules that we can turn on and off depending on what we need to do. And if you go into mods enabled, you can see all the modules that are actually turned on. So a lot of those are. So we have our status module and our env and our authz and all of these modules which are ready to go. And as we add modules via apt-get, you can actually install Apache modules that way, like PHP or Ruby or Python. You can come in here and turn on and off those modules. So those are the main locations of our Apache configuration files. And as we're building our servers and maintaining and managing our servers, you'll be spending most of your time in those areas, or in those two directories. Now, the last command I want to show you guys before we move on to the next video is that you can also start and stop Apache using the service command like we did with SSH. So if you type service apache2 restart, you can actually restart the web server. You can also do a service apache2 reload, which will not restart the server, but it will reload the configuration files in case you've made changes. And you can also do stop and start depending on what you need to do. So that's the basics of interacting with Apache. Taking this one step further from just installing it and looking at our hello world, we're going to now start to get into adding new sites and configuring those sites to work properly. So in the next video, we'll take a look at virtual hosts and the a2en site command, and we'll show you guys how to get more than one site set up on the Apache web server.